Before the Corps of Discovery left to explore the Louisiana Purchase, President Thomas Jefferson told the expedition to be prepared to encounter large ground sloths and woolly mammoths. They didn't find any of the extinct animals that Jefferson thought they would, but they did document 178 new plant species and 122 new animals that Americans knew nothing about. Here's a journal entry describing one of these new animals. Can you guess what animal they were describing? If you said a jackal, you're absolutely wrong. It was a coyote. The Spanish were so afraid of America expanding to the Pacific that they sent multiple search parties to capture the Corps. The only enslaved person on the trip was a man named York. He was known for his hunting abilities, and ironically, his black skin likely saved their lives a few times when interacting with American Indian tribes. When everyone else received payment at the end of the trip, York received nothing and remained in bondage. Despite great fears of danger along the way, the expedition only had to use their weapons for protection one time, and that was to fight off the Blackfeet Indians on their way home. They mainly used their guns for hunting, and Lewis actually got shot in the butt in a hunting accident. You know, kind of like that Wedding Crashers scene. As most of you already know, the MVP of the trip happened to be the only woman, Sacajawea. When Sacajawea was younger, she was kidnapped by a rival tribe and separated from her family. On the trip, she not only encountered her old tribe, but found out that her brother had become the chief. Throughout the trip, she was the interpreter and guided the Corps through treacherous terrain. She saved many of the artifacts when one of their boats capsized, and probably single-handedly kept Lewis and Clark alive when they were starving to death in the snow. Many of the crew members could not pronounce Sacagawea's name, so they called her Janie instead. Most people think it comes from Jane, the army slang for woman. Because many of the Native Americans were more open with sexual practices, most of the Corps suffered from a venereal disease at least once in the journey. When people got sick on the expedition, they were treated with things like small doses of mercury and bloodletting. But my favorite remedy has to be the super strong laxative nicknamed Thunderclapper. Sergeant Charles Floyd was the only person who died on the trip, and it was most likely due to a burst appendix. Lewis's Newfoundland dog, Seaman, survived the journey all the way to the Pacific Ocean and back. Yay, Seaman! After becoming semi-famous on their return, many of the Corps members sold some of their gear to make some extra cash. When Lewis got home, he struggled with depression, drinking, and money problems, and was eventually found dead with gunshot wounds in his head and chest. Historians argue whether it was murder or suicide. Clark became very close with Sacagawea's son on the trip and nicknamed him Pompey. He later adopted him and his sister when Sacagawea died in 1812. Almost all the artifacts given to Thomas Jefferson were lost when the boat taking them to Richmond, Virginia was stranded. It is hard to comprehend the mindset of the Corps without thinking about a modern-day equivalent. Let's compare it to the first humans to go to Mars. Would you go? If so, what do you think would be the craziest part of the mission?